I turned down the gravel road expecting to see my cabin roof through the pines. Saw nothing but sky. Instead, bulldozer tracks pressed into wet earth and a laminated notice zip-tied to a birch demolition due to safety hazard, signed neat as a threat by Deborah Knox, president of the Pinecrest Bluffs HOA. And I swear the quiet around Cedar Glass Lake went hollow in that second, like the world exhaled and forgot to breathe back in. I picked a broken porch swing chain out of the mud, cold and gritty in my palm, and all I could see was Ellie under a blanket on that swing, face turned to gold water at sunset the last summer. She wasn't in pain. People think this kind of thing is about money or lumber. But it isn't. It's about being told the place that holds your memories is just an eyesore, a liability, a check mark on somebody's clipboard. You know what I mean? I had sold my place inside Pinecrest, planned to live full-time at the cabin. My granddad bought back when land was just land, and when Deborah rolled up in her little white golf cart. The week I was packing boxes, sunglasses low, that sugar ice voice of hers said, "You can't just walk away from obligations," and I said, smiling for the first time in years, "I can when the deed transfers." Then nodded at the tree line, "And the cabin isn't yours to police." And she chirped, "We'll see about that," before humming off like she hadn't just promised a war. I finished the closing, drove out for 3 weeks of contract work, came back with the windows down and pine in the air, turned the bend and the room where we lived. Our best days was gone. Executed, not burned, not collapsed, just erased. The rock fireplace snapped like a bad tooth, and my knees almost gave out. The deputy who came out, read the notice, shrugged that slow official shrug. "Looks like a civil matter." And I stood there with the chain in my fist, thinking, no, it's not civil at all. That night, I walked into the HOA meeting without knocking Deborah at the head of a folding table, like a queen on a plastic throne. Charlene Pike, with her spear of a pen on one side, and Owen Rudd, a rent-a-badge with retired cop shoulders on the other. And when I said, "You had no right," Deborah sighed and slid a folder of grainy photos at me, red circles around moss and peeling paint, and then an invoice that made my blood go cold, plus a lien threat on my lake lot. And the neighbors in the doorway looked at their shoes like the floor might help. I left with the chain like a talisman. Sat on my truck tailgate until the night turned thin, and in the morning my friend Hank Porter pulled in with 2 diner coffees, leaned there in silence, like real friends do, and finally said, "She fined me $100 for an oil stain, called it an environmental hazard." And I laughed once, bitter and short, and he nodded at the ruin. "You're free enough to fight no mortgages, no toddlers. She can hold over you. If you stand, I'll stand." And something in my chest unclenched. I didn't call a rally. I made a list, knocked on back doors, met folks at kitchen tables that smelled like maple syrup and pine sol. Heard about Mrs. Dillard's bird feeder that attracted undesirable wildlife, the Rodriguezes, is ordered to tear down a swing set for not being on a pre-approved list. Nobody could produce. And we spoke quietly because Deborah had a volunteer network that logged observations like it was national security. She felt us stiffen and did what bullies do. She overplayed her hand, sending Charlene with a nervous guy in a polo for a mandatory safety inspection at Hank's place. And when the man mumbled, "I'm the inspector," I asked for his state license, master electrician, structural engineer. "Which one?" And when he blinked, I said calm and flat, "Then you have no authority here. This is private property. You have 60 seconds to be back on the sidewalk and..." Yeah, that happened. Backpedaled, like the porch might bite him while curtains twitched up and down the street. The wins were small, and the grind was real. Deborah weaponized bureaucracy with emergency sessions on mailbox beige and decorative grass length and garden gnomes as visual clutter. But we showed up and sat there, a quiet reminder. And one afternoon, I drove to the county records office, where the clerk eats sunflower seeds and the fan squeaks, asked for plat maps and easements from the 70s, and found it a lakefront access easement the HOA had leaned on for decades that was supposed to have 2 signatures, developer and county. The developer signed, and the county never did. A missing signature is nothing until it's everything. And I drove home feeling steel where the rage had been. Because here's the thing, I didn't want a lawsuit. Deborah lives for a stage, I wanted a wall. So I called a quiet lawyer from the city, set up a dull little LLC called Northgate Timber Holdings, and started buying land. Not what you'd expect. I didn't wave cash at obvious parcels. I bought a landlocked rectangle of woods. Nobody visited a thin strip along the highway that looked like a drainage mistake. A tired little lot. Even the tax office forgot to remember, and piece by patient piece, the sliver under the path. Deborah's contractors used to roll their machines, and when my buddy Walt, a civil engineer with hands like shovels, looked over the papers, he tapped the map once. Whoever owns the ground under the path controls the path period, and for the first time since the bulldozer, I slept without seeing smoke that wasn't there. My daughter Lily came by with groceries, and Worry took one look at the maps taped to the walls and said, "Dad, this won't bring Mom or the cabin back." And yeah, that one landed. I almost quit, almost sold it all. Then I heard Ellie in my head, handling our old miserable neighbor who hated our dog. She never begged him to be kind. She built a taller fence, and later that night, Lily called and said it out loud. Mom never argued with bullies. She built better fences. And I stared at the county map and saw the final post. I needed a forgotten logging road that touched the highway, called my lawyer at 7 a.m. Buy it today. Deborah felt the ground move. Paranoia has great hearing, so she packed a quarterly meeting with fear about vandalism at the community garden and an unauthorized vehicle near the access road. Let her gaze land on me so the whole room would follow. And when I stood to say, "You trespassed to demolish my cabin," Owen lifted a slow palm. "Sir, sit down," and the air went cold around my seat. Allies looked away, and I drove home feeling like I'd lost. In the only court that mattered, I told Lily I was done. She listened and said, "Finish the fence," and then came the annual meeting with a live stream, because Deborah doesn't know when to stop performing the room full of folks who just wanted their weekends back. And after her victory lap, she rolled out a community protection levy to pay for cameras and nightly patrols, a war chest to watch us and fight me. And I stood, "Point of order, Madam President," and she smiled like a cat. "You are out of order, mister." Carter and I said, "Don't think I am." Walt taped the old plat to the wall. I circled the little rectangle by the shore where the county never signed. Deborah's face went the color of a printer jam. "Clerical error," she said, and I nodded. "Ordinarily sure, but in this case it's moot, and we put up the second map. A current parcel overlay, shaded almost entirely. One calm color. About 6 months ago, I said Northgate Timber Holdings started buying land here. The Miller Farm to the north, the woods to the west, the logging road to the south, and the strip right under your lakefront path. And I let that sit. The room creaked, and Deborah whispered, "Who are they?" And I finally looked her in the eye. "Me, I am Northgate Timber Holdings," and the room sounded like a wave hitting rock. "Jenna." My lawyer stepped forward, voice steady as a level. "As owner of the underlying parcels, my client is informing you the levy is unenforceable on his property. You have no authority to install cameras or patrol, where you have no rights. Any lakefront fines are void, and your demolition crew trespassed. The moment they cross the boundary, restitution will be sought," and Hank said from the back. "Sit down." Deborah and Mrs. Dillard stood with her hands shaking, but her chin high. "You bullied us over birds." And then the chant rose. "Vote. Vote." A motion from the floor to remove the president seconded. So many times the air buzzed, hands went up like people finding their voices again. And it wasn't close. Deborah stared at the gavel, as if it might save her, then set it down like a bad idea, and walked outdoor, slamming like a stamp on the end of her rein. That should be the credits, right? The clean cut. But life frays at the edges. The board scrambled to unwind. Fines and cancel the lien threats. Folks cried and apologized and argued by the lake. Some thanked me. Some said I went too far, that buying land to win was dirty. And maybe you're thinking that too. Maybe you're wondering if I beat a bully by becoming something worse. Or maybe you've lived under a clipboard long enough to know a wall is the only language it respects. I didn't rebuild the cabin. You don't replace a heart with lumber. I sold most parcels to a conservation trust, so no one can carve this place into vacation boxes. Kept a strip of shore and set a simple bench with a small plaque. A place for peace and some evening. Evenings I sit there, watch kids fish off the dock we built together, and I feel the lake finally breathe again. Tell me what you think. Was I right to buy the ground under their rules, or did I cross a line of my own? Have you ever dealt with a Deborah in a golf cart who hid behind standards to make good people small? Drop your story in the comments. Push back if you disagree, and if you believe nobody with a clipboard should get to bulldoze a man's peace, hit subscribe. We've got more fences to build, and I'd like you with me.